Politics as usual. First of all, this is random, but I think it would be a nice segue into what we want to talk about first, which is how you be blowing up everybody's spot across your beautiful city. So, are you excited to see LeBron James play basketball in Memphis ever again?
You mean Hebron James, Zionist,
Ooh, ooh,
the man who really got up during a presser within the last 12 months and was like, I haven't been to Israel yet, but I've heard a lot of great things and I'm really looking forward to
great.
great
Now
things.
that's a bold faced lie. I know plenty of people who've been to Israel. I know people who've been on their birthright trip.
You've heard great things from
That's not a
who?
thing.
But then also, that whole thing was weird. This is not me defending LeBron. Let's be clear. I will spend approximately 0 seconds of my life defending
Good.
LeBron James. That said, I've watched that clip over and over again, and it feels to I feel like he was like that question was set up. There was some stuff that happened before that we didn't see, but also I'm like looking at all those dudes. LeBron, you're a billionaire. You're a titan of your
Yeah,
sport. Who are these random Chads, Trevors, and Terrys that you're golfing with? Do you not have real friends? Do people not like
that
you?
part.
Have we identified the Caucasians in this?
I think it was like a clip from a show or a recording or something like that. Something that would be a larger sort of piece of content or entertainment for his ever growing sort of media collection development, in which he makes really cheap sports themed reality TV and puts it out and makes a sum off of it instead of writing scripted series, because doing that and having cameras follow you is much cheaper than actually making quality shows. The clip is part of who he has become, insofar as there are cameras following you so that you can create cheap content around the cameras following you so you can make more money off of it. All right. It's peak LeBron James at this point. It's peak billionaire ruling class. I do agree that it was set
Yeah.
up. I didn't actually take issue with anything he said until he got to the whole Nashville thing. Right. I'm sure Memphis is great. Get out of my way, fly. I'm sure Memphis is great. I'm sure there are parts of Memphis that aren't great. I live in Baltimore. I'm not going to say we're like sister cities, but I could see why someone would be like, yeah, I hate going to Baltimore. Like, if I played shortstop for the Yankees and I signed a 14-year, $750 million contract, Baltimore would probably be one of the places I didn't enjoy going as much as other cities. I'm okay with that. Right? Like, we play in Tampa a lot. They open the season in San Francisco. I'll put it this way, and y'all can get mad. I do not care. If I had $1 billion, which is not going to happen, but if I had $1 billion, I would not live where I live. I think there are a lot of people who are like that, and that's okay. Him not liking Memphis, I thought was fine. The issue comes in when you use you not liking to go to Memphis as a parallel to you should move the team to Nashville, which I'm like, but still isn't bad. But the issue for me was move the team to Nashville because they've got NASCAR and the Predators and Vanderbilt University.
Yeah. Hockey and NASCAR were the things.
That's when I was like, okay, there's some self hate in there, bro. No one can argue with me on that. Like, you just saying, hey, I have a better time in Nashville and I'd rather spend 3 nights a year in Nashville than 3 nights a year in Memphis. Whatever. I think you're stupid. I think the food's much better and there's much more culturally in Memphis, but I get it. You're a billionaire. Cool. But you're going to go to a NASCAR race when you're at Memphis on a Monday in January? No, you're not. That's the issue I took with it.
A lot of the criticisms about what he said were criticisms from people like cultural critics within the Black community who themselves are Black, who are talking about LeBron James, who is a Black athlete. I read all of it and watched all of it and found myself nodding along and going, that makes sense. That's a particular area in which I feel like maybe my job is to do
I see.
this and not this. But what I will say is that the one like through line that I saw a lot of people writing and speaking about that made me go, oh, is LeBron, if you are uncomfortable in the blackest city in Tennessee, then just say he said echoes the sentiments of a lot of people who live in the outlying suburbs and municipalities of Memphis who want to put on the mask of Memphis and our culture and our music and our food and like the grit and the grind and all of that. Like these housewives in Germantown were absolutely like beside themselves with joy during the whole like grit grind
Mm-hmm.
era of the Memphis Grizzlies. They loved Tony Allen. Of course, Mike Conley was their
Of
favorite,
course.
but of course, because he had zero technical fouls his entire career. They were the same ones who were going to FedEx Forum and waving their little growl towels and singing "Whoop That Trick" when we were up by 15 in the third quarter, and then looking over their shoulders as they walked back to the covered garage parking at FedEx Forum and drove their Tahoes all the way back to Germantown as fast as they could because it was Memphis after dark and there was crime. It's the same energy. And I have the same response for LeBron and anyone else who has that sort of energy about them, which is stay over there. Leave us alone. If Memphis sucks so bad and you like it so much where you stay at because they got everything, then bitch, stay there.
Maybe I think he really wants them to move the team to Brentwood.
I'll tell you who I need to weigh in on this. I'll tell you who I need to weigh in on this, who is absolutely going to be an authority on this subject. A figure from which I think both the Black delegation and the Caucasian delegation can agree is qualified to speak on this. I need Haley Williams to weigh.
That's fair. Haley, if you're listening.
If we could get Haley on this, that would be great. So, girl, what do you want the Grizzlies to go to Nashville, or do you think it's fine where they are?
But like LeBron, it wouldn't shock me if he's. Oh, I've never intentionally listened to Paramore in my life. Which, by the way, I don't trust black people who don't like Paramore.
We should let Haley Williams hate this
All right,
matter.
Haley, holla at us.
You ready to make 50% of the population?
Yeah. What's up, you? No, I'm just playing. We're gonna talk a little bit about the Manosphere, but anyway, I sent you this podcast from Radio Atlantic, which I didn't actually know existed. It's basically just the Atlantic's podcast. They talk about the same stuff they write about, no difference. It's basically like the New York Times, except maybe a little bit marginally better. Anyway, and a couple weeks ago, they published this episode called "The Manosphere Feels Betrayed." Blah blah blah. Elaine Godfrey, who's a contributor at the Atlantic, apparently has spent a bunch of time in the past couple of years listening to Manosphere Bro podcast, which like I wonder how her mental health is doing and how her personal life is holding.
Elaine, thank you for your service.
Like you deserve fully funded 403B and unlimited margaritas. But anyway, apparently I had heard rumblings of this in terms of these guys. Your Joe, only person I actually know is Joe Rogan. I've seen more Theo Von clips than I want to. I have to admit that I do find Theo Von funny. Yeah, I don't go out and seek his content like Theo Von podcast. But when I come across a Theo Von clip, I'm like, all right, he's got a little bit of juice there. Those are the only ones I know. I guess Andrew Schultz is another. She mentions quite a few in here, guys I've never heard of. I would say the thing that makes me qualified to talk about the Manosphere is being a man, because I've never seen The Matrix. Full stop. I've never seen The Matrix. I'm a cinephile. I like my movies made before 1996 or after 2007.
Hold on. Jamie, pull that
up. I'm sure it's a great film. I just haven't seen it. But have you seen The Graduate?
Damn, I thought The Matrix came out in 96. I was wrong. It came out in 99.
This is a different conversation, but I'm going to put a pin in that. Because there's a contingent of people out there that are like 1999 is the best year in movies ever. And I think a certain kind of person believes that.
What kind of person, Fred?
A person very much so inclined to listen to Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz and hide old Playboys under their bed and have crunchy socks in the corner and expect that someone else is supposed to make their dinner. That's just me. Now, hey, if you're a woman or just someone who's a little more progressive, like of all the years of 1999, really? And they use stuff like Election and The Matrix and The Sixth Sense, which is a great film. But like to argue that, I don't know. Anyway.
I think 92 to 96 was the golden era of movies in the 90s.
Right. Like of all the years in the 90s you can pick of movies, like there were some bangers in 95, banger, Toy Story, Shawshank Redemption. Anyway, I'm actually looking to start a movie podcast. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I can talk film for Phil, holla at a boy, Fred at relentless.love.
Yeah, The Craft came out in 1996.
Bangers. Independence Day, As Good as It Gets, came out in 96. Sleepless in Seattle was in 93. Anyway, don't get me going. I love my movies.
We'll get back on topic in just a second, but I just looked it up because I don't know that I've ever Googled The Craft before. I don't need to. It lives in my heart. The Craft has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 57%. Man, fuck y'all.
About Rotten Tomatoes?
IMDb, 6.5 out of 10. Letterboxd, 3.6 out of 5?
Can't be trusted.
You bitches don't know
You don't.
ball.
So stop trying to call next.
Yeah, stop trying to tell us you know. Stop trying to tell me there's a difference between movies and film while The Craft sits with a 57% Rotten Tomato score. Y'all don't have nothing to teach
I
me
hate people who argue that. Who literally take the
about
time to tell
cinema.
you it's called film and not movie. We know the technicality. Shut the hell up.
Actually, a lot of the people that say there's a difference between cinema, film, and movies, right? In the Manosphere. All right, we're back.
We
We're
back to
back.
the
We're
Manosphere.
back.
Elaine Godfrey at the Atlantic is basically just saying, hey, these dudes are starting to turn on Trump. They were a huge reason why the president was able to rehabilitate his image. They were a huge
Mhm.
reason that he was able to win in 2024. You know, he tapped into this underrepresented, undervalued sort of electoral demographic. And now they're souring on him in many ways. Joe Rogan is like, MAGA's full of whack, dork. Andrew Schultz apparently is mad that we're spending money bombing kids in Iran instead of making things cheaper here. They all seem to have been mortified by the murders of Renee Good, but most prominently Alex Preddy. I guess because a white guy with a gun is not supposed to be killed by law enforcement. That's my theory as to why they were suddenly mortified. A woman or anybody, a person
Hey,
of color, probably doesn't matter to them. But a white guy with a gun, with a legal gun, now they're up in arms. I have lots of thoughts on these folks, but I would love to get your take. One, what your knowledge, experience with the manosphere is, and two, whether or not you think any of this actually matters electorally. I asked the first question because I'm just now learning this language. There are two things I didn't know anything about. One was the manosphere until like a year ago. It's just not a space I live in, an ideology. I literally just started watching YouTube maybe like a year ago, in full honesty, right? Like I would watch a video here or there. But in terms of my go to place of watching stuff, for me, that's new. And two was the Epstein files. I don't know what I was doing with my life, but I just did not know anything about Epstein prior to a foray into looking into it the last few months. I'm playing catch up here, which uniquely helps the perspective, but I don't know. You tell me.
I'm clear. You just had a birthday,
It's coming
right?
up, June.
Oh, that's right. It's June. For some reason, I thought you were
Gemini gang,
period. And you're turning.
35. Oh, that might be the answer.
That's not real. You're not turning
I am.
35. You're not.
Thought I was
Okay.
old.
Yeah, I think you're older than you
Oh,
are. Yeah, it's incredible. Not being a bigoted fucking dork is really good for anti-aging. It's like the anti-aging secret.
agreed.
Anyway, I'm saying all that to say, so you're turning 35 this year, and this is really like the first real foray into the manosphere. I don't know, man. I think that's why you got a wife. I think that's why you're married, first of all, because you're like a whole human
Points
being.
made.
Here's my experience with the manosphere. Unfortunately, I'm very familiar for a couple of different reasons. The manosphere, as we know it, is like a new media form of toxic masculinity, which has appeared in many different ways in popular culture over the last decades, centuries. And as we were talking about Facebook earlier, I very recently have been back with my foot on the necks of men on TikTok as well. I've had to make several videos explaining like the difference between stoicism and broicism and masculinity versus toxic masculinity. And they are in symbols in my
Can't be
comments.
toxic, Cat.
Never mind. I care very much about men. I care very much about young people, which includes men. And I believe, as Bell Hooks also does, that feminism is for everybody. I think that the patriarchy hurts everyone, and we don't talk enough about the ways in which the patriarchy hurts men. The manosphere is an extension of the patriarchy. Therefore, I am interested in understanding the manosphere because I am interested in helping people move beyond systems that keep us harming ourselves and each other. So that's it right there. I am not an avid listener of any of their shows, but I do occasionally. I listen for the same reason that I am on the email list for the RNC and the 87 email list that Trump has, for the same reasons that I watch Fox News or OAN or Newsmax, listen to Candace Owens. I am interested because at my core, I love and care for our species. And I know that we can't get to a place where we are no longer seeing one another's
Yeah,
humanity. So I do occasionally listen to Joe Rogan. I actually think Theo Vaughn is like low key really
I do
fucking
too.
funny. It's been interesting for me watching his evolution on his show. Andrew Schultz for sure, Nick Fuentes
Oof.
definitely. But then also this kid Clavicular, who wasn't mentioned in the podcast that you and I were listening to, but I think is also a part of the Manosphere. So I'm familiar, I care because I have had to care for the young people in my life and for some of the men in my life because I refuse to abandon them. I just won't do it. I won't abandon
Mm,
us, Fred, as a
I
human
love it.
race. I have to understand what struck you most as you're diving into this. Where does it make sense to you? And I'm not saying it makes sense to you in terms of, oh, I agree with this philosophy,
Oh yeah.
but where do you see these entry points and these topics of discussion? Where do you see it and go, yeah, that tracks. I understand why people listen to this. I understand why they're here.
I prefaced my newness to this because I think that allows me to come from a level setted sort of approach. And the biggest thing I think about is it's like a pigeon of a language. Insofar as it's like a lot of what on like right wing fringe ideologies, hyper conservatism, MAGA cults, whatever in general, is that if you have to have a slice of a pie, if the whole sort of ideology is a pie, all of these things, all of these fringe ideologies, these fringe viewpoints hinge on 20 to 25% of it being very valid and true and affirming. First of all, from the podcast, the biggest thing that stuck out was the beginning, where she's 6 in 10 Americans say they're unhappy with the direction the country's going in. And I'm like, who the fuck are the 40?
Yeah, I'm like,
That was the first note I took. But with a lot of these guys, I will say, I guess the story I'll tell is, oh, this is a great thing. I'll put it to you this way, because a lot of stuff I think is sort of steeped in gender wars and dating experiences and adolescence and interactions with women. A lot of what they'll say is, okay, well, women have inherent value by way of simply being women, right? By looking a certain way, by having access to certain things. I think human beings have inherent value because they're human. I'm not necessarily jiving with that. I'll use this as a perfect example. Ari Lennox, who is an R&B singer, made a
mm-hmm,
comment a few weeks ago where she's on a radio show and she's like, for the longest in my younger years, I was attracted to like this toxic energy and the toxic guys. And the nice energy or guys who would consider themselves nice and gave me like sweet energy, I just wasn't attracted to, right? They were boring and I didn't want to really talk to them. It just sort of ends that clip with, and now I see those same guys who gave me sweet energy, who actually wanted to treat me well, like getting married and having families. And I'm like, oh, that could have been me. And I'm like, two things must be true here. I'm like, one, you just gave a lot of fodder to these birds with these manosphere misogynistic podcasts to just like run with the tropes that they already have. And I don't think that
yeah,
means you don't want people to be honest, but you did just give them a lot of red meat to just go dangle forever long. That being said, I think to answer your question, like where does some of this come in? That is an experience that a lot of young men have, right? Like I look at that as someone who, I guess I'm still a young man, who was once a
yeah, yeah,
found myself attracted to or wanting to date certain girls who thought I was too much of a nerd or too nice or whatever. The challenge with me is just I never internalized that, right? It's just like, okay, reject it. It was just like, all right, well, struck out on that one. I got another at bat, right? I never internalized it in terms of, oh, okay, this girl doesn't like me. I'm gonna curl up in a corner and die. Hey, bro, I'm gonna keep shooting. One of these is gonna splash in the
yeah,
net. But I think that's one of them. The other
yeah,
thing, to be a little bit more serious, is I think a lot of this stuff stems from the socioeconomic changes that we've seen as a country over the last 50, 60 years that we failed to address. And that's the serious underpinning of it. It is much harder to find a decent paying job. It is much harder to get a job that allows you to out earn certain women, especially if you went to college, for example. Like boys are not going to college or pursuing higher education as much as girls are now. These guys saw their grandparents and their great grandparents and maybe even their dads work these blue collar jobs, be able to take care of a family, provide insurance and so forth. And they have the expectation that they should be able to do those things. And those jobs just by and large don't exist anymore. They're used to certain dynamics and relationships being a certain way that they're dad or uncles or grandparents told them about as it comes to relationships with women and so on and so forth. And those things, those underpinnings, those structures, those societal expectations, and those social economic factors are no longer what they used to be. At its core, you got a bunch of boys growing into teenagers, growing into men who have had ideals and expectations communicated and taught to them concerning what it means to be a man, right? And the ways in which they've been taught, the ways in which they've been encouraged to live out their masculinity, they are not underpinnings of our societal structure anymore, economically, psychologically, socially, or spiritually. And so you get out here at 25, 26, 21, whatever, and it's all the things that I have been taught are not reality. How in the hell do I adjust and live in a world like that? I think that that framework is the very serious sort of archetype and fundamental underpinning of all of this that we kind of do have to address. The biggest thing I come to is I'm not a manosphere bro. I think all this stuff is pretty stupid. I think a lot of these guys are misogynistic. The one thing I will say though is, and I have an understanding of this, my Substack is really like feminine, if that makes sense. Like I don't know what the algorithm is, but it's a lot of women, which I don't mind. I love and respect. But I do get to see the other end of this and these concepts of decentering men and all this other kind of stuff. And while I understand where people come from with that, these personal experiences of harm and abuse and mistrust, I think it's problematic, utterly unsustainable for any society that teaches anyone that half the population can be quote unquote, if that makes sense. Like, I think if you want to stop centralizing romantic relationships, if you happen to be heterosexual, I think that's fine. But I think that therapetization of our sociological interactions, in which we give everything that is far too nuanced 2 or 3 words without explaining, without having undergirding conversations is a challenge. Because if I based how I felt about women off my personal experiences, we're tough, right? But I've been done dirty by quite a few women. Some of them I'm related to.
Yeah.
One of them was my mom. But it's the only thing I will say in terms of, okay, I see where you are coming from. This is the 20%. The other 80% is BS. Please let me be clear about that. But undergirding all of that is, like, for example, it would not be okay for me to say I'm going to decenter women suck, blah, 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 based off those experiences. And it's considered mature. It's considered emotionally intelligent for me to know that my experiences are a small subset of the experience at large. Feel free to push back on this. If I were a woman and I said, based off my experiences with men, I am going to shun relationships with men and decenter them, that is socially acceptable. Now, I think some of that has to do with patriarchy. Some of that has to do with the spectrum of harm that can happen between men and women. And I have an appreciation for that. Women can break hearts, men can kill people, by and large, right? I'm not saying like those aren't typical. I hope you're tracking what I'm putting down. And so I think these are like the larger sort of sociological, philosophical, psychological things that have to be a part of this conversation that like we just aren't having. It's all like tweets and therapy language and clickbait. And we got to get that figured out if we want to be a sustainable society democracy here. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the manosphere. Long thoughts.
It's okay. We could have plenty more thoughts about it. We could continue to have thoughts about it. But you asked me 2 questions and I only answered one. And then I asked you another one. You were asking me, what do I think this means electorally?
Yeah, it doesn't
And
matter.
yeah, it does matter. It does matter. We got midterms coming up, and then we've got another presidential that's still a little ways away. But yeah, we got midterms. So what does it mean? Here's what I think. And this is where, here's what we got. We've got the Manosphere consists of different figures and podcasters who, a lot of them were very influential in mobilizing a demographic that is typically ignored by both parties,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, um, to turn out and vote for Trump in the last, every time he's run, basically, but especially in this last election. And they were able to do that through a few different ways. I think the one that we don't look at enough, because we want to look, when I say we, political operatives and strategists, we want to look at the members of the Manosphere who are already really entrenched in politics as their trade, like as their content. So we want to look at, we tend to place a lot of emphasis on Tucker Carlson, like Nick
Glenn Beck.
Fuentes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn Beck. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that they weren't influential, like Rush Limbaugh, who I know is looking up at us right now.
It's on up, not
Yeah,
down.
is looking up at us right now, really upset that you're letting me speak. They were super, super influential in Republican politics via talk radio. But the real influence came from, for this demographic of men, came from podcasters who were not explicitly political.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people tended to listen to them and place more weight, because if you are coming from a place of experience in politics and your content is political, people assume, often rightly, that you have an agenda, that you are beholden to the establishment. So a lot of these figures were inherently very contrarian, very anti-establishment, very anti-authoritarian, and their messages were of things that were like economic populism, for example, even though they didn't couch it as such. So the Democrats are likely looking at Theo Vaughn getting really upset about Palestine, for example, and like coming to this realization much later than I think any of us would have preferred. And they're looking at Joe Rogan calling MAGA a bunch of dorks. And they're looking at Andrew Schultz having Trump on his podcast and telling him, like, what we're doing with immigration is not what you said. He's getting us into wars. He said no more wars. He said things are going to be affordable. Gas right now is higher than giraffe pom pom, and they're rightfully disillusioned. Here's where I very gleefully burst your bubble. If you're a Democratic strategist or operative, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Not being Trump is not enough. Just because these men and their listeners are upset about Trump does not mean they are abandoning MAGA as an ideology, does not mean they are abandoning the Republican Party, because many of them weren't registered Republicans to begin with. And it does not mean that their logic in their brain is, if I'm not going to support this guy anymore, then I'm going to support the Democrat, because that has never been their calculus. They
It's
have
not how this
always
works.
been against the establishment, which is why they liked Trump so much in the first place, because he was very clear that he was using the Republican Party as a vehicle to power. They are going to stay home in November. They are not going to vote unless slash until a candidate or a public political figure emerges that has demonstrated proof of support for and a really charismatic platform for economic populism, first and foremost. And for this idea that the duopoly that we continue to exist in has to be dismantled. How do we know this? If you go back, you can see the number of times that Bernie Sanders has been on Joe Rogan versus the number of times Trump has, of times other conservative lawmakers have. A lot of these men were supportive of Bernie Sanders in both of his runs for president. Um, Andrew Schultz just had Mamdani on his
Mm-hmm.
podcast. These are figures who champion economic populism, who champion values like equality and fairness and justice and punishment for the bad guys, whoever the bad guys are in this equation, without being sanctimonious pricks about it. They don't make it their entire platform. They don't make their identity their entire identity. And what those guys have in common with Donald Trump, by those guys, I'm talking still about Bernie and Zoran, is that both Republicans and Democrats hate their ass. So this is not, and they're not going to defect to the Democratic Party because they feel like they no longer have an option in Trump. They're going to stay home. And the Democratic Party or the Democratic establishment is not proving that it is prepared to absorb, to expand the tent. How do we know this? Because of the Senate votes on war powers resolutions, the Senate votes on sending military aid to Israel. It's growing in popularity with the American population, just as things like common sense gun control are really popular with the American population, just like the right to abortion on demand is really popular with the American population. funding us instead of funding Israel is also increasingly really popular with the American populace, not even electorate, just people. But we don't see those same values reflected in things like Senate votes. Like earlier this week, I think it was, Bernie Sanders brought for the fourth time a resolution to the floor of the Senate to stop all military aid to Israel. It failed. And it didn't fail because every single Republican voted against it. It failed because it had Democrats helping Republicans defeat it. And then you have people like Hassan Piker. And let me be clear, if Hassan Piker has no haters, I'm dead. But I know an ally when I see one.
Yeah.
And the left cannot afford to ignore Hassan. The Democratic Party cannot afford to ignore or demonize Hassan, as they are in a very coordinated way attempting to do. They've been asking the question forever and ever, oh, who's the Joe Rogan of the left? We need our own media networks. Baby,
You got one,
he's
bro.
right there on Twitch 8 hours a day. And you've got a smear campaign running against him right now. So that's a whole tangent. But that's what I think it means electorally. I think that the Democrats can't get over their own superiority complex and get out of their own way. And that's what's stopping them from getting out of their own way. Is they talk about being a big tent party, but the only people they want to welcome into the party are Republicans. Sorry, white
I'm
Republicans.
just playing. No, sorry, this is a podcast. That's for the video. I'm sorry. No,
No, you're right. You're right, though. You're right.
because they don't want the black and Latino ones either, for being honest.
No, because they look at them and say, how could you do this?
Mm-hmm. You ain't getting nothing from me. And like, to be fair, right? Like I asked that question of black conservatives. It's because I'm black. It's because I can ask that. No one else should ask that. No one else can ask that. No institutional white Democrat can come to me and be like, "Hey, why are there black Republicans? Why is water wet? What have y'all done for the past 60 years?" To that point, though, you're like, "Oh, until we have." First of all, let me backtrack a little bit. Democrats will do really well in November, and they'll do really well in November because the president is increasingly unpopular. Full stop. You are going to see
And it's the
in
midterms, and the opposite party is in power. We know they're going to do well.
it's history, right? So you're gonna see the bozos like the Ezra Kleins and everyone else at the New York Times and wherever. Oh, what does the new blue wave mean for the future? It means nothing. It means people just don't like the current administration. That's all it's gonna mean. All right. When you're reading all this stuff over Thanksgiving and Christmas, it doesn't mean anything. It just means the current administration is unpopular. Period. Point blank. Full stop. Save yourself the time. Don't waste brain cells or your life reading those articles. I'm telling you that in April, so you have plenty of time to ignore it by the time it comes around. All right, cool. Saving you time in your life. Number two, like it doesn't, I'd say it does matter. And you mentioned, all right, so you know what? The economic populism argument, Mondami and Bernie, Andrew Schultz loved Bernie Sanders back in 2020 and some time before then. I have the perfect Democratic presidential nominee in 2028. And no one's going to listen to me. But do you know who it is?
No.
I actually used to work for him. Mr. Ossoff is right there.
Oh, God.
He's right there. I know
What?
you don't like. I know you don't like him, but here's the challenge, especially when it comes to president. You still got to have enough cachet to be able to get establishment money, because you do need multiple billions of dollars to run for president now, whether we like that or not. Until we get Citizens United out of here, that's just the reality. But he has enough of a sort of populist anti-Israel voting record and stance to where you could get enough people on board there. I'm not saying this is freaking
Does
Fred
he?
Hampton.
Does he have an anti-Israel stance?
Have you Googled John Ossoff Israel?
Jamie, pull that up.
I'm just saying, charismatic white guy who can talk that talk. Hey, I'm trying to win. I want to win some elections. Democrats going to do well this year in spite of themselves. And then this whole class of white consultants and strategists are going to puff their chest out and be like, yeah, we did that. Great ads, great digital fundraising, great approaches. Yeah, we like that. No, nobody care about what y'all got to say. Y'all ain't special. People just don't like the other side right now. Gas finna be $6 a gallon by Memorial Day. That's why we're going to do well. And we're like, how can you know this so early? Hey, man, that's straight. Iran said that's straight closed. Do y'all know how formidable and how patient and how much resolve them people have, that thing ain't getting opened up anytime soon. Regular global oil consumption and flow is not going back to the way it was anytime soon. It ain't gonna happen. Now, unless this man magically finds a way for people to be able to afford starter homes at $300,000, again, it's a wrap. Like the challenges he has are so fundamental to his to his like stupidity that they also can't be fixed in 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
Because you know how I know all this is fake? The S&P hit an all-time high yesterday on April 15th. Every single day in my life for the past 3 weeks, I kid you not, this is not hyperbolic. At some point in conversation with grown adults, the absurd price of something comes up at least 3 times a day, whether it's housing, whether it's gas, whether it's groceries, whether it's a car, whether it's cars, whether it's healthcare or just going to the doctor, right? Like that, you know how people used to be like, "Oh, how's the weather? It's a scorcher out there. It's 90 degrees," or "Oh man, we need this rain." This is starting conversations with how much gas costs.
Yeah.
You can't change that in 6 months. I'm done. Sorry.
It looks like it's really weird because I can't find anything more recent than like February, but it looks like he has come a long-ish way and is like starting to be like, yeah, okay, guys, we can't really do this anymore. But anytime somebody begins anything they say with, I support a two-state solution, I'm like,
I
but
get
that's
it.
but that's me. But that's me. I understand. Not everybody's there. I get it. Whatever. Um, Here's the thing. Like part of me can see
You
it.
can see it. You can see it. You can
I can
say it.
kind of because there is a Kennedy esque aspect to him. Look, you still see my face. Don't. It's
But
not
why
trying to.
some say the moon?
But Asaf, in my opinion, faces similar to Kennedy a tough road to hoe when it comes to convincing Americans that he is fit to be president based on religion alone.
That's
Because even though this was decades ago, you saw what they did to Kennedy's ass about being Catholic.
yeah.
It's the same vein of Christian nationalism and supremacy. All these pastors flying Israeli flags outside of their churches right now, they don't love Israel. They love using the Jewish people as collateral damage in order to usher in the second coming. That's all it is. And I don't know, and this is not a reflection of my personal belief. This is me looking at the American landscape and going, do I think that the majority, like, we had think pieces and arguments and hemming and hawing from here to kingdom come when Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton ran for president about whether or not America is ready for a woman president. It's going to be that same song and dance about whether or not we're ready or whether it's the right thing to have a Jewish president. And I think that our country's historic support of Israel and people's turning opinions and turning support for Israel would be a really large hurdle for him to overcome. But would I take him over Gavin Newsom, who I do think is going to end up being the Democratic Party's nominee all day?
You think Gavin Newsom gonna be the nominee?
Who else they got? The answer is a lot of people, but like, do you really think they're going to put Ossoff up?
I do. I'm speechless. We have such there are so many challenges. Like who knows how much like ruin there will be in 2.5 years from now. I'll put it to you this way. Better question. What do you think happens first? A Jewish man or a woman?
Oh, a man. Absolutely, a man.
I'm not disagreeing with you, and that will be like very Kennedy esque in terms of who's actually president. Is it the Pope? Which is crazy to think in hindsight. But and you could argue like maybe his about face on some of the votes and issues in terms of Israel is direct sort of preparation for primary season. All those things could be true. My challenge with Gavin Newsom is just, hey y'all, like we really can't afford to nominate the governor of the most liberal state in the union for president. Like, I just don't like. How does Gavin Newsom go and try to win votes in Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona? Like, You think he's got the juice to do that?
No, he's weird and creepy,
Yeah.
plastic looking, and like,
Anyway,
no.
I don't know how he got there. All that, and to bring it full circle, my man John can go to these Manosphere broadcasts and talk with the bros, and they would eat it. They would eat it up. He'd have them just sitting there eating out the pomade. Give me more, Mister Ossoff. Give me more. Because a lot of these dudes are really just submissive to other male authority figures, if we're being honest.
Oh,
Even though the Bible says submission is a two-way street, you know what I mean? I don't believe in that whole, oh, my wife should submit to me. I think we should submit to one another in accordance and furtherance of the Lord, because we have mutual respect, adoration, and love for one another. Therefore, I love and respect her for the human being that she is, absent her relationship to me, and she does the same, and that is how households flourish. But these modes just be, give me more, Andrew Tate, give me more. And so, anyway, I'm done. No, I'm just saying, think about it. If we got time, the presidential campaign starts in 10 months.
I don't even want to think about it. And this is assuming.
Yeah, and we're all still alive because we all almost died last week, and everybody just moved on from that so quick. And then the stock market hit a record high, as if we weren't on the brink of nuclear war. This is how you know none of this is real. And another thing, and this is random, but I got to get this off my chest, because you remember when everybody was out here putting up black squares on social media and stuff to show their
Yeah,
support for Black Lives Matter and all that other stuff. And we rightfully said, hey, y'all some placating bums. This ain't real. You ain't actually doing nothing. I missed that. Do you not find it weird that we was all literally like, it's very plausible. Like, and no one's talking about, it's very plausible the world could have ended last Tuesday. And we all just like willy nilly, like chilling. Everything's fine. S&P's at an all time high. My man was talking about dropping a nuke. Are we going to talk about this? I feel like I'm talking to both.
I feel like
Are we going to
people
talk about this? Anyone?
I feel like people can't talk about it. They don't have the space to think about it or talk about it until there's less of a reason to talk about how expensive everything is.
Oh, god dang, you have a point there.
It's so weird. It's almost like when people aren't hyper focused on their own day-to-day survival, they have more mental and emotional space to think about other people.
This is their, I think that's part of their strategy, though.
That's the strategy of capitalism. That's the strategy of white supremacy.
I'm just saying, me and the homies was, not me and the homies, me and the ancestral homies was getting it out the mud back in 1942. Going to work 12 hours a day, trying to feed 10 babies, and still being like, hey, we going to vote. Maybe we're just not as strong of a people as we were before. I don't know. I'm getting into different territory, and we probably need 2 hours to dissect that. Anyway, this was fun.
Yes. Yeah. What are we going to talk about next week?
I'm going to actually finish reading this book, and then we're going to dive into one day everyone will have been against this. That's what we're going to talk about next week. My bad. The semester just ended. I had to fire a client who was annoying and was getting on my nerves. Yeah, and I'm actually happy that's over with. Oh, random. Okay, I do want to get this off my chest, because this for all the people out there trying to figure out what you're doing, what's coming on next in life, what you got. I don't know, all the other stuff. Oh, I don't got no next steps. Sometimes, I'll put it this way. It was a beautiful day the other day. I was out, I was walking. I had the Hoochie Daddy shorts on, guns out, 90 degrees, bang, out there. My nose is giving me some issues because the pollen is wild, but it's all good. I forgot to take my Zyrtec that day. But anyway, I was like, this is a beautiful day. I'm glad I'm here to experience this. This is well documented. I talk about this. I write blogs, yada, 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 about my depression, suicide ideation in the past, all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm so happy, like, that I found the belief, the spark, the energy to keep living life way back then. Because these very small things, like sitting on the park bench eating ice cream when it's 89 degrees outside, that's the beautiful stuff. That's what life's about. And I had this really annoying client. I've been working with him since last May. Just never really listened, terrible, doesn't take strategy and advice, allows people to be disrespectful, so on and so forth. And I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to stay committed to something or someone or see something through because that's quote unquote how it should be or how we've been taught to. But I think one of the things this has really taught me, especially as someone who had like a rough childhood, was abused and all this other stuff, like you get this sense of what capitalism, what sort of our institutional upbringing does, school and other things, is make you have this sort of faux sense of I might be in trouble, and they
Mm,
ingrain that in you early on because so many of us grow up in environments where we are really in trouble, right? If we don't do certain things or act a certain way or conform, there is actual
mhm.
threat of violence and abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, whatever. And what I finally really freed myself from at 34 years old was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't have to do it. I don't want to do it. And I'm not doing it. And there's nothing you or anyone else can do about it. Now, there are still most certainly definitely potential consequences to certain things and whatnot. And for me, it was just the loss of a client, which means the loss of funding. And whatever, cool, lose one, go get another check. But I think, especially the sort of kind of space I'm in life, is I keep coming back to this tweet that I saw. The economy is so messed up. You might as well chase your dreams.
Hmm.
And that's where I feel like things are now, right? Like with the number of people being laid off, with how much everything costs, so on and so forth. Look, I'm not saying don't take this as if you got a decent 9 to 5 where you're making good money and not being abused to go quit that joint. What I am saying is that when you are in environments that make you feel like anything less than the full human that you are, and there is space for you to get rid of those things and remove them from your life and have more peace of mind and still be able to meet your bare necessities, I don't feel like we live in times where you can just chase checks. Whereas, like when we met, the space that we met in 2020, it made sense, I think, because of just a variety of things from economics to where the world was. Like, it's a job out here. Want to pay me to make this kind of money? I ain't got to leave the house. I get to sit at home. It didn't make no sense not to do that. I'm out here saying some 6 years later, there is no price on your mental. And if there is someone or something that is causing you to be anything less than who you want to be or feel like you are anything less than the full dignified, emancipated, made in the image of your creator person, you gotta let that go, homie. Life too short.
It is indeed. It is indeed too short. Speaking of too short, it's
What's
time to
my
blow the
favorite
whistle.
word?
It's time to blow the whistle on this episode.
My bad. My bad.
You see what I did there?
I see what you did there. My bad. I can't do that. YouTube probably gonna give us a copyright infringement. Cat, I love you. We love you. Shout out to our 22 subscribers on YouTube too. Y'all are great. We love you.
2022.
Hey, it's getting up there.
It's kind of up there.
YouTube is tough. Hey, man, 5 subscribers on YouTube is better celebrate that joint. Anyway, I'm done. Politics as usual.